Hello, and welcome to the Gerontological Society of America's Grant Chat, an introduction to the NIA-funded centers, coordinating centers, and pilot funding opportunities. I am Dr. Gail Towsley from the University of Utah College of Nursing. GSA's Grant Chats are a series of one-hour virtual sessions designed to bolster a broad range of grantsmanship skills specifically tailored to your work as a gerontologist researcher. GSA Grant Chats feature panel discussions with peers, experienced researchers, and leaders in gerontology, and offer the opportunity to connect with and learn from a wide spectrum of experts in aging science. Today's Grant Chat provides an overview of the center programs and the coordinating centers supported by the National Institutes on Aging, also known as NIA. If you are looking for pilot funding for your next research project, you might consider one of these different centers or networks. There are over 120. To begin to peel back the curtain on these organizations, representatives from NIA and a network designed to coordinate the various centers will provide a high-level overview of NIA centers, the role of the coordinating centers, and how to stay informed about the opportunities they offer. Before we begin today's program, I would like to provide a few logistical considerations. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Use the chat box throughout the presentation to comment or ask questions. Please keep your audio muted until it's time for discussion. The Grant Chat is being recorded and will be available after the event on the GSA website. I am joined today by GSA members Dr. Zachary Baker, Assistant Professor, Edson College of Nursing and Health Innovation, Arizona State University, and Dr. Patty Slatum, Visiting Scholar at GSA and Professor at the Virginia Center on Aging, Virginia Commonwealth University, who will serve as co-moderators and are part of the work group planning these sessions.
And I just threw my introduction into the chat. I do really actually enjoy reading those. So if people would be willing to throw them in, I'm not saying that like Zara or Dana, I'm going to call you out by name and tell you to write it, but I sure would appreciate it. This whole idea for this session is something we started out last year and something I've been thinking about for a while, this idea of peeling back the peer review curtain, because there's so much that goes on that like if you're in the right room and you know the right person to ask the right questions of, you get the answers, but otherwise you don't. And this seemed like a cool format to help folks get some of those answers. So thank you, Gail. To open today's Grant Chat, I want to introduce some of our panelists. These are folks who have a lot of really cool knowledge. So Dana Jeffrey Plude, Deputy Director, Division of Behavioral and Social Research at NIA, National Institute on Aging. And then Odette Vanderwillik, Deputy Executive Director and Director of Grant Programs, American Federation for Aging Research. Normally in these Grant Chats, we do more of like a panel discussion, and we'll do a little bit of that at the end. So please do throw questions at us, and I'll try to make sure that we get those in. But today, Dana and Odette also have some kind of like presentations, some ways to orient us on some of the things that we're gonna that we might need to know. So Dana, I'll hand it over to you first, if that's okay.
Super. Thanks a lot, Zach. Appreciate that. I hope everyone can hear me okay. And I'm really delighted to be here as part of the webinar and thank GSA for the invitation. I'm going to talk a bit about the NIA Centers programs, give you kind of a 60,000-foot view of how they're set up and what they do. And then turn it over to Odette to talk a little bit more in detail about the Research Centers Coordinating Network. But before I get into all of that, next slide, please. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my division, which is the Division of Behavioral and Social Research, BSR. Can't help it. We're in the government. We have to use acronyms. But what we do is support research on social, psychological, economic, and behavioral aspects of the aging process, as well at the individual and population levels. There are some cross-cutting themes that cut through the work that we support, like understanding and addressing health disparities. We take a life course perspective on the aging process. So we study from sort of early adulthood, middle adulthood into later life. And we support research on biobehavioral and biosocial integration processes. The schematic on the right side of the screen shows you some of the different areas of focus of our research that we support in the area of Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's related diseases, AD/ADRD. And we have, like other divisions, a set of resources that are available to you, researchers out there in the public domain, having to do with data resources, research networks, and like I'm going to talk about today, these centers programs. And I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that our director of our division is Dr. Liz Nielsen. Next slide, please. So first up on the list of the centers programs is the Alzheimer's Disease Research Centers. So this is one of the 3 centers that is not in my division, but rather is in the division of neuroscience. There are 4 extramural divisions of NIA. Each supports at least one centers program. Division of Neuroscience supports these ADRCs, as they're called. The ADRCs there are 37 of them arrayed across the country, as shown on the screenshot from the ARDC Coordinating Center. So one of the characteristics of these NIA centers programs is that each of the centers programs has a coordinating center. And so I heard the directive at the beginning saying, okay, we're going to talk about how can you access these centers and learn about what they're doing and what's the best way of finding what resources they have to support your research, and how can you find what kind of funding opportunities might be associated with each. And my recommendation is always go to the coordinating center of each of these programs. So instead of looking at the 37 individual ADRCs, you can go to the one coordinating center that, as the label implies, coordinates activities across those center programs and find a way of sort of consolidating your effort into one site instead of 37 different ones. The center, the coordinating center for ADRCs is located at University of Washington, and Dr. Walter Kukl is the contact PI. And my colleague, Dr. Nina Silverberg, is the program officer associated with these ADRCs. The ADRCs support developmental projects that can be between $50,000 and $100,000 in direct cost per year, with a project term between 1 and 3 years. And the National Alzheimer's Coordinating Center, the screenshot here on the screen shown right now, it coordinates those applications and that activity of making those awards. The maximum total funding for each new investigator award is $135,000 in total costs. Okay, next slide, please. So the next center that I'm going to talk about are the Claude D. Pepper Older Americans Independent Centers, OAICs. The Older American Independent Centers, there are 15 of them across the US. The coordinating center is located at Wake Forest University, and the contact PI is Dr. Delane Kitzman. My colleague Basil Eldada is the NIA program officer and point of contact for this center's program. The coordinating center of this program offers flexible, high-value early career faculty awards up to $5,000 to help advance the applicant's career and build cross-center collaborations. The use of the funds must be in accord with the general NIH guidelines, and examples include things like supporting the purchase of new software, minor equipment, key laboratory supplies, shared technology, and travel reimbursements, that sort of thing. So for each of these center programs, I've tried to include a link, and as I understand it, the slide set will be shared with you after the presentation so that you can link into each of them and do a deeper dive on your own. All right, next slide, please. So the next center program are the Nathan Shock Centers of Excellence in the Biology of Aging. And these, there are 8 of these centers around the US. The coordinating center is the American Federation of Aging Research, where my colleague Odette is from, in combination with Steve Ousted, who is the contact PI at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, Stephanie Liederman, who's at AFAR. They together are the multiple principal investigators for these center programs. They offer pilot funding through through each center, with the requirement that the funding for pilot projects has to be provided to investigators that are external to the individual supporting center. So this is an opportunity for people from the outside to actually get support from the center to support research that's relevant to the mission of the center. And I give some examples of some of the grants that are supported by the SHOCK program on the slide here. Next slide, please. The next set, these are the centers supported in my division, Division of Behavioral and Social Research. And we're starting with the Centers on the Demography and Economics of Aging and AD/ADRD. There's a link there, like I've said, for the others. These Centers for Demography and Economics of Aging are coordinated by a program at the University of Michigan, the PI for which is Dr. Amanda Sonega. And the PO, the program officer at NIA, is my colleague, Dr. Amelia Carricker. The CDEAs offer cross-center administrative supplements and tuition awards. So if you're interested in those kinds of activities, the deal would be to go to the coordinating center to find out about the application process and the timeline for submitting and such like that. That's true for each of these programs. Next up are the resource centers for minority aging research. So the next slide, please. The RICMARs, as we call them, are coordinated by a new award to the Gerontological Society of America. So kudos to GSA for stepping up and serving as the coordinating center for the 18 RICMAR centers that are across the US. The GSA award was made to the contact PI is Dr. Trish D'Antonio, and the contact person, my colleague, Dr. Melissa Gerald, is the program officer for the RICMARS programs at NIA. And there's an example there of some of the awards that have been made by the RICMAR program. Each center offers its own kind of pilot funding, but again, the coordinating center provides the comprehensive list of what the due dates are and how each of the centers goes about its business of making these awards. Next slide, please. Next up are the Roybal Centers for Translational Research. And there are 14 Roybal Centers across the US, and the coordinating center is located at the Feinstein Institutes for Medical Research. And the contact PI is Dr. Karina Davidson, and my colleague, Dr. Lisa Anken, is the NIA program officer and point of contact for the Roybal Center programs. Each Roybal Center offers pilot funding. I'm somewhat more familiar with this program and know that each center supports between 2 and 3 pilot awards each year. And so when you do the math and figure there's 14 of them, that's a bunch of awards that are made by this program each year to support pilot work relevant to the translational focus of the Roybal Centers. Next up is the newest addition to the Centers program, and that's the Artificial Intelligence and Technology Collaboratories, AITCs. There are 3 of them, as shown on the slide here. The coordinating center is supported by Rosalie and Associates, which is a private company in Bethesda, Maryland. The PI for the award is Dr. Rose Lee, and the program officer from NIA is Dr. Partha Bhattacharya, my colleague in the Division of Behavioral and Social Research. NIA has earmarked $40 million over the next 5 years to fund demonstration technology projects that utilize artificial intelligence approaches and technology to improve care and health outcomes for older Americans, including persons with AD, ADRD, and their caregivers. Applicants can request up to $200,000 in non-dilutive direct costs to be expended within a 12-month period. And the multi-year commitments and time extensions may be selectively granted on a case-by-case basis by the awarding center. Awardees are also eligible to apply for $10,000 in Amazon Web Services to support their research activities through the Amazon AWS Activate program. So, like I said, this is one of the new kids on the block, and the first round of pilot funding that was supported by this program, there were something like 200 applications that were submitted. So the competition was pretty steep, but the payout is pretty big in terms of the funding that's available to support this kind of research after the fact. Okay, so that's a real quick overview of these 7 centers programs. But before I turn the podium virtually over to Odette, I want to talk about one more kind of opportunity that might be worth exploring. Thank you for advancing the slide. So I mentioned that we support a number of other kinds of activities, and by we, I mean NIA broadly. We support various resources, collaboratories, networks, and other kinds of funding opportunity announcements. And one of the suggestions I would make to you is if you have an idea that you think is worthy of some kind of support, you ought to reach out to a program officer at the National Institutes of Health generally, and NIA in particular. Just to give you some examples, there's the Research Centers Collaborative Network on the upper left side of the screen, but we also support various kinds of other more focused networks and initiatives like the Aging Initiative, the Scientific Research Network on Decision, Neuroscience and Aging, the ARCH Network, which has to do with criminal, I'm stumbling for words, sorry about that. It's about the criminal justice system, thank you very much. And work within, like with the inmate population and so on. And then there's also an animal models network. So there's a bunch of these different networks. We also have the NIA Impact Collaboratory. So it's not only the center programs that offer these kind of pilot funding opportunities, but these other initiatives oftentimes have associated with them some kind of piloted type support. And it's worth exploring to see whether there might be a match for the kind of research that you're supporting yourself. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me and to let me provide this overview. And now I'll turn it over to Odette.
Great, thank you, Dana. And thank you, everyone. And thank you, GSA, for the opportunity to meet with you and talk a little bit about RCCN and some of the other NIA initiatives. Some of what I'll be talking about are things that Dana already mentioned, but I think it's important that, it's probably good to hear certain things twice. So I'm the Deputy Executive Director and Director of Grant Programs at the American Federation for Aging Research. And one of our, or I should say AFAR's mission is to advance healthy aging through biomedical research. And we do that through a range of initiatives, including several NIA funded programs, such as the Research Centers Collaborative Network. The RCCN, the PIs for the RCCN are actually Steve Kuchevsky at Wake Forest University and Stephanie Letterman at the American Federation for Aging Research. The operational side is really what AFAR is involved in, and Elizabeth Pritchett Montalban, Program Officer at AFAR, and I work closely with Stephanie and Steve to implement the various activities of the RCCN. Next slide. So a little bit about RCCN. It's the Research Centers Collaborative Network, and it was launched in 2018. And the goal was really to initiate cross-disciplinary collaborative networks that bring together leaders from the 7 NIA funded center programs. Dana highlighted each of those programs in his presentation. I'm just listing them here again. And as Dana mentioned earlier, AFAR manages the Nathan Schock Centers Coordinating Center. Next slide, please. Just wanted to highlight some of the activities that the RCCN is involved in. First and foremost, it's workshops. We convene researchers from all these programs to discuss common themes, and we usually have 2 workshops a year. Thus far, we've organized 9 workshops. The most recent one was on nutrition, and there will be actually a nutrition workshop part 2 in the summer of 2024. Another important component of the program are pilot awards, and we have 2 deadlines for the pilot awards, and they are October 1st, so that one is coming up soon, and then April 1st. And we changed things up a little bit this year. We will now have a letter of intent deadline. And really the goal of these pilot initiatives or pilot awards is to address topics spanning the mission of the 7 NIA Center programs. These awards are $65,000 each, and we award at least 2 per cycle. And the projects must include PIs from at least 2 NIA Center programs, but it could be more as well. And then in addition to the workshops and the pilot awards, we also offer travel awards to our workshops. We issue publications based on our workshops. We had webinars on a range of topics, both career development focused, research focused. We're doing a series of webinars together with NIA on some of their initiatives. We just did one on the READY initiative, and we'll be holding a webinar on K Awards pretty soon. So stay tuned for that. And then also the website, the RCCN aging.org website has a range of funding opportunities listed and upcoming events. So I encourage you to take a look. Also, if you want to have easy access to all of the coordinating center programs, all the links are over there. It's all organized, so you don't have to try to figure out what each link is for each coordinating site. We also have 2 tools that maybe you'll find handy. One is called the Research Compass. It's a publication search tool, and it allows you to search for publications from the 7 NIA funded center programs. And then also we have an interactive map of all the NIA centers, which will need some updating. As Dana mentioned, there's a new coordinating center for RICMAR and some new RICMAR centers, actually. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a screenshot of the interactive map. So it's really easy to see where the various center programs are. And if you highlight one of those links, one of those circles, it actually shows you the link and you could go straight to that particular website. So it's actually pretty handy to have. Next slide, please. And so as you've already guessed, there are many opportunities out there, and RCCN is really trying to do its best to collect as many of those opportunities as possible. So I encourage you to go to the opportunities link and also to the pilot award RFA link. Sign up for our monthly newsletter. We are in contact with all 7 NIA center programs on a regular basis, and they will share information with us that they feel is relevant to a broader aging community. So not just the ones that are within their own networks. And then we also encourage you to go to their websites, because there are, I mean, even for RCCN, it's almost impossible to keep track of all the things that are happening. But I think RCCN is a really good start, and makes it easy for you to navigate, all the opportunities and the coordinating centers that are out there. Next slide, please. This is also something that Dana mentioned, and I'm just mentioning another couple of NIA funded initiatives that are out there with pilot grants. In addition to the ones Dana mentioned, there's the GEAR Network, the Cancer and Aging Research Group, the ClinStar Coordinating Center. Actually, that's one of the centers that AFAR manages as well. Last year we had a similar webinar, and I went to NIH Reporter and looked at some of these other NIA funded programs. I found about 17 networks out there that, but I know there are more. It takes some time. There are just to illustrate how many of these initiatives are out there offering pilot award opportunities, as well as other opportunities like the travel awards and career development activities and whatnot. So I really encourage you to do that. And I'd be happy to share the list that I created last year. Maybe you, GSA can distribute that after the meeting. But some of the codes to look for are the cooperative agreements, the R33 and the R24 grant mechanisms often have built-in pilot grant, not always, but and Dana, I don't know if there are any other types of mechanisms that offer these kinds of opportunities, but I know for sure these often do. Next slide, please. Again, RCCN is a good place to start. Sign up for our newsletter. And again, here is our link to the RCCN website. Join our mailing list. Follow us on, well, I guess it's X now, but follow us on Twitter. Next slide, please. And just sort of kind of a more of a closing note, why should you even apply for these types of grants? And this is exactly, my point was, because these grants are generally last known, funding ratios tend to be higher, although that clearly is not the case for the AI grants where there were 200, but that's in general, funding ratios tend to be higher for these programs because simply they're not as well known. So and then in addition to getting the funding, there are often other opportunities to present your work at annual meetings. There's career development support. You get to meet your peers, become part of these networks, really opportunities to develop collaborations and interact with leaders in the field. So just some things to consider when you apply for funding. Why you should apply for funding. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Just another link here. My organization has been doing this for many years. We've developed some tips for things to consider when you apply for funding. Email me if you have any questions about these programs. Happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you both for those presentations. I have been through these presentations before, and I still pick up something new every time. I got quite a few words of notes and a couple of questions here. I will say that if anybody wants to drop questions in the chat or like raise hands or something like that, we're totally open to that. I'll let you go. And if you don't, I am going to ask questions the whole time. So it's just a statement of fact. Some might call it a warning. First, I do want to say thank you to everybody for dropping your info in the chat. A lot of people don't do that sometimes, and I wasn't kidding when I say it's fun. Like, I've had collaborations start because somebody read like a little description in the chat, and I can already see that like some of you have connected with each other too, which I think is really cool. So not the intent of today, but something I like, and so I want to say thank you. One of the things I walk away from looking at both your presentations is I'd love to take all the opportunities that come up in a year and add up the total number of dollars available, because it's substantial. Like, I mean, we're well into the millions, right? We've tried to add up to like quantify these opportunities in a couple different ways, like how many pilots are available or how many centers exist, which is not an answer that like people intuitively knew before. I think that would be another cool thing for us to explore. Or if anybody on is willing to dig through RCCN's website right now. I will say RCCN's website is really cool. And Odette introduced that interactive map to us last year. And like, I check that map a couple times a year. I think it's so cool that you can just dig into all the centers like that. And also see like how many centers exist in some places and help you get an idea of like, why does somebody know everything about every center? Well, it's because they went to Michigan and there are so many centers at Michigan or something like that. I will say too that we're going to have a workshop at GSA, which to my knowledge is full for registration, but that does mean that there will be a lot of like awardees and awarders and people running these centers who you can come talk to. So even if you didn't make it in for registration, we can see if there's anything we can do. I don't know if I'm allowed to offer that, Judy, but you can slap my wrists later if I'm not. But either way, we can put you in touch with people who are working at some of these centers and might have really good specific feedback for you.
We are keeping a waiting list, Zach.
Okay.
For the workshop. So if you didn't get an opportunity to register for that workshop at GSA and you'd like to, you can get on the waiting list in case some folks need to back out. Sometimes that happens around travel. So I encourage you to do that.
Cool. Thank you, Patty. So yeah, I think it's a cool opportunity. It's half a day and it's very similar to this. We have a couple of talks and then we have a couple of panel discussions and a couple of round tables where, hopefully you can get your questions answered and figure out how you can put some of this money on your CV. I also wanted to point out that, Odette, you hit on this. 200 apps to a pilot opportunity is a very unusual thing. One of the things that we talked about when we first started putting this together is that there are some of these pilot opportunities that are not getting enough awards. I do some work on impact, and it's single digits every semester when we solicit applications, single digits. And Impact's given out, at least as of 2 years ago, Impact was giving out more money than any other pilot award that didn't go through additional NIA feedback. So it's a lot of cash being given out and not a lot of people being able to take advantage of it. So I really do encourage you to kind of think about how these might fit into your work. I say that as a multiple failed applicant of several pilot awards, but I don't think that's necessarily all bad. I've worked those into subsequent grant applications, those things that I wrote. I've worked them literally a paper that I'm going to work on when we get out of this. Some of the things I wrote for a pilot award originally are in that paper. So I think there is potentially a lot of utility. I also talked about in the beginning, how do you get in the room to talk to the right people to ask the right questions? This is how you get in the room. There are people to whom I submitted applications. Those applications were not funded and they still invite me to their meetings every month, right? They're still guiding me on my career. Odette, I see you came off mute there and I just wanted to offer you the floor if there was anything you wanted to say.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. And even if you don't get funded, it's never a waste of time. It really isn't, because it really helps you sort of formulate, your own research, your thinking, the questions that you want to ask, and it helps your grant writing, especially for early. I mean, if you're going into academic research, this is such a huge part of what you need to do. So consider it a good experience, and often, as you just mentioned, you do become a part of a network and people will work with you, and it's definitely, and if you say practice makes perfect, and also, so I would definitely encourage people to consider applying. And a lot of these programs are specific for a specific research area. So they don't necessarily get a lot of applications, but do have nice pilot awards available. So, and they look for people to apply. So don't hesitate. And again, also when in doubt, ask. Both NIA staff and the people that are responsible for these projects, always feel free to reach out to me, or I can direct you to someone who knows more about a certain initiative.
If you don't mind, Zach, I'll piggyback on what Odette was just saying. And when it comes to reaching out to program staff at NIH, I always recommend you have something in writing, like a one-page draft of a specific aims page. It doesn't have to be a final product, but it ought to be something that sort of articulates the goal of what you're trying to do and the aims that you're trying to achieve, because it's much easier to have a conversation. It's true. I've talked with people who say that, they reach out to program and they don't hear back. Everybody's really busy, but it's part of our job to give that kind of support. And it's a lot easier to set a date and time to speak with someone if I have something concrete about which to speak with them. So Some people will send me a draft aims and they're not sure even what kind of a funding opportunity they ought to be looking for, or what kind of activity code, like Odette was mentioning activity codes earlier with the U's and the R's, the 24 and the 33s. And, it can all be kind of a bit of a challenge to sort all that out, but that's part of our job, is to help you do that. What I ask is that you just give me something concrete on which to base our conversation. So, both when I was prior to my current job, I'd been with NIA for 7 years, and before that, I was 14 years in the Center for Scientific Review as a scientific review officer. So, it's good to reach out to program staff when you're developing ideas, and they can make suggestions to you not only about the funding opportunities that might map onto what you're trying to do, but also what study sections might be the right one to review your kind of work. And there's other tools that are available that you at GSA probably ought to have another webinar on some of the resources that are available to support people in searching out those kinds of connections. So reinforcing what y'all have said about, don't be afraid to have the idea, and don't be reluctant to reach out. The only thing I ask is that you give me a second chance. If you've reached out to me and I haven't replied, then, do that thing where you say, hey, just in case this might not be at the top of your inbox, give us a second chance. And there's bound to be somebody who's going to follow up with you. So I think it's worth having the conversation. Thanks.
I got to say, Patty's been great at getting answers from Dana. So, if you don't get that answer, just CC Patty on it, and you'll probably get an answer in like 30 minutes or so. I don't actually do that, please. She's getting a lot of emails. She's very busy right now. Something you just mentioned was the U's, the cooperative agreements, and the R33s and the R24s. And I know, Odette, when you brought those up, you suggested asking Dana if there might be other codes that come to mind. Are there any other codes that come to mind that people should kind of like keep a side eye out for?
Well, I think Odette was trying to point people towards the kind of network opportunities that might have pilot funding associated with them. And I know in our division, those networks that I was mentioning earlier are either an R24, which is a regular R type of an award, but the 24 is a very flexible kind of a thing. And it's usually, in our case, it's used for networks around some theme. So we have a network on decision science, we have a network on stress measurement, and so on. And if you went to our website, you can click on the tile that says networks, and you see about 25 or 30 of them there. About half of them are cooperative agreements. That's what the U stands for. I know that some people out in the audience might think U means uncooperative, but it's actually cooperative agreement as a U. And that's just a deal where program staff have more of a connection with the research team that's more interactive. There's actually a project scientist who's a member of NIH who's part of that scientific team. And the R awards are more sort of independent, but they still have oversight by us. So the R24, U24 is one to be looking for in terms of finding networks that address certain areas. The R33s are a little bit different and are mainly, well, in my experience, they've been largely infrastructure type of awards where it's either about equipment or about resources to help support research. But, if you dive down into the rabbit hole of all the activity codes, there's hundreds of them. So, having a clue about what you're looking for makes sense. And passing reference was made to various kinds of training and career development activities that we support too, which also provide for resources for funding research. So there's a potpourri of it. I think that Odette did a nice job of targeting the ones that would be sort of the networky type of those, but we also have other awards that are about sort of short-term training, like a week-long course that's focused on a particular kind of methodological analysis or statistical kind of a thing that we also do. So I could keep going on, but I won't. Thanks. I think there was a question in chat, though, that might have been directed to me.
Yes, about whether there's going to be networking or an information session of some kind sponsored by NIA at GSA, the meeting this year, for this kind of in-person networking.
Yeah, absolutely. There are two sessions that we always seem to run at GSA. One of them is for sort of an advanced, middle, and further career type people. who want to know about like what's the funding picture and what, like what's going on in the universe that is going to affect their research program. But the other one is for new people, newer investigators. And I mean, they're both networking opportunities, but I think that that latter one that I just mentioned, the one for early career people, is particularly good because that's a chance to meet other of your early career people that you might form collaborations with. And the way it usually works is we break out into groups, and I'm usually with a group of say between 15 and 20 people, and we go around the circle and ask, who's got a question. And it's rare that somebody has a unique question that's not on anybody else's mind. So it ends up being a really nice kind of give and take exchange opportunity. And yes, there'll be 2 of those sessions. They'll be called something like NIA Meet and then some bunch of words, but that's what you want to look for. Thanks.
I have a question while we're waiting for some more to come into the chat. And that is, I want to understand if my understanding is correct. Each of these programs will have its own means of announcing their grant opportunities and seeking applicants, right? There isn't like a clearinghouse for those where they might seek out or announce their opportunities.
Yeah, so there's not a clearinghouse, but like I think RCCN is a fabulous resource in terms of trying to get information about all of the different funding opportunity announcements. And I appreciate Odette's point about you can't do everything, but man, there's a lot of information that is compiled by RCCN from those center programs. I don't know that we have anything similar to that, Patty, related to our networks. But, like that could be something I bring back to the think tank.
It's making me think about GSA, right? As a place where you could announce here's a place you could announce your funding opportunity. Yeah. If you thought it was something of interest to the scientists at GSA. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I should mention there are other networks also that reach out to us, like GEAR and the USD Prescribing Network, others that send us their updates. So and the more it gets known, and we have a large mailing list. I think it probably goes out to like 7,000 people at this point. So others are coming to us. So definitely sign up for the RCCN newsletter. It comes out every month, and it also puts easy links to the coordinating centers at the bottom of the newsletter. So, because we do recognize we can't do everything. So you could also, if your interest is in Alzheimer's disease, you can go to RICMAR or to the ADRCs or whatnot. But we try to keep track of a lot of these things and help announce a lot of these initiatives.
Rather embarrassingly, I don't think I'm on the RCCN newsletter mailing list, so I will be after today. I think I was on my old email address, and whatever, it doesn't matter what my excuse is.
I did that after last year's workshop, and it is very interesting and helpful. I mean, not just for the pilot grants, but many other opportunities that come out through the newsletter. So I actually enjoy it quite a lot, and I encourage everybody to sign up for it.
Patty, I don't know if this goes to you or Judy, but there's a question in the chat about signing up for the waitlist and how people might go about that. I don't know if it's easier to respond to that in the chat, or go ahead.
I just asked Judy if she could put the link in for how to do it. So if not, we will definitely make that available with our follow-up if I don't have it right in front of me now. But when you go into, there you go. Judy's answered our question. Thank you, Judy.
So kind of an off-the-wall question that I've been thinking about, and I'll ask the question and then I'll follow it up with a bunch of gibberish so you can think about your answer and you don't have to listen to my gibberish. I'm curious about a weird center, something that like stands out as doing something different. So, we've got these centers that are thinking about AI, and we've got these centers that are thinking about pragmatic trials, and we've got these centers that are thinking about racial and ethnic disparities. I'm curious if there's anything that pops out to you like, this crew's doing this and it's really unusual, or this crew's doing this and it's really innovative, or yeah, you're so aware of so many different kinds of centers, and I don't have chances to ask you guys questions like this every day, and everybody else is letting me ask questions. So I was wondering if either of you had something that pops to mind.
So I think that's an excellent question, and there's always people cooking up ideas for new and different kinds of centers. So we can't fund all of the ideas that are out there, unfortunately, but we're doing our best to kind of diversify and support the ones that we are. I'll just make note of the AITCs, those artificial intelligence technology collaboratories. And I noted that they were unusual, and Odette emphasized that the idea of getting several hundred applications for a pilot program is pretty wild and unusual, weird, if I could borrow Zach's term. One of the reasons it's weird is because that program is actually intended to support small businesses in addition to, on top of, aside to, whatever, academic kind of researchers. And it was startling to us that there was as big a response, but I think it speaks to the need for there being something in between academia and business to meet a need for entrepreneurial thinking in that space. And so I think the AITCs are filling kind of a niche, weird need that melds together a couple of worlds that have been really kept pretty separate. We have a small business program that's intended to support small businesses by definition, and put in place by Congress 30 years ago. And we have the traditional academic research that goes on. But I think Odette made reference to something called the READY program, REDI. And that's something to do with like research entrepreneurship development. And I can't remember what the I stands for, but it's the idea that, sometimes people are in academia, but they don't know that the academic path is the right path. And maybe they need some boning up in how to be an entrepreneur and to be able to develop sort of that business side of their mind. And so I think these are some innovative ways that NIH is trying to address what seems to be emerging needs as time goes by. And I'm still pondering the question you asked, Zach, about how much money do we spend on pilots? I don't know the answer, but it's in the millions for sure by the time you do the math at the end of the day.
Odette, are there any ideas that come to mind for you about weird center or somebody doing something different?
It's whatever your definition of weird is, right? I don't know. I mean, some people will think, doing research on fruit flies is weird, but others may not. I mean, I can't think of anything just offhand that I find weird. So.
But not that it's weird. I would suggest that Odette, some of the like the ClinStar program, it's innovative. So that doesn't make it's not weird, but going back to that point about networking and the opportunities it creates for cross-pollination. I had the pleasure a couple of years back of attending one of the ClinStar meetings, and I was really impressed at the constellation of new investigators and established investigators. Like there were, graduates, quote unquote, of the program that come back, alumni, right, and interact with the earlier career people. And I was very impressed by that mix of folks and how that program supported that kind of activity.
Yeah, that's a good point. And ClinStar, for those of you who are not familiar with the initiative, it's clinician scientists and transdisciplinary aging research. And it's really a platform for clinician scientists to help advance their careers through a range of initiatives. We have office hours, mentoring, the annual meeting where there's peer-to-peer mentoring, alumni mentoring more junior people. There's a database of people through which you can find others to potentially network with. pilot funding, again, so many different things that are available through that network. And it's all about, creating this network of people with similar, although also different interests, and get them to work together, because we can't do it by ourselves, right? I mean, the field is so diverse, and we really need people from as many different disciplines to come together and work together. So, and that was one of the reasons the Clean Star Initiative was launched.
So your emphasis on the mentoring part makes me remember that the RICMAR programs have mentoring as a huge part of what they do, right? It's the resource centers for minority aging research. And so it's really quite broad in terms of what services those centers provide for the research community at large, and mentoring is a big part of that.
I know we're at time here, Patty. Can I steal just another minute? Okay. I just want to say the Clin Stars. So I mentioned before that like there are lots of these I had never heard of, and so like Gail and I overlap in lots of things. We go to the same interest groups. We go, we're in a lot of the same meetings. Patty and I are not, right? Like we have very divergent expertise, and I love the exposure that something like this can provide. And so to the point of seeing these different centers and hearing about them and thinking about like how your stuff can fit. We had a panelist last year who's one of my closest friends. She comes up to me afterwards and she's like, those Clin Stars, that award you just mentioned, that's perfect for this idea I've been talking about for 2 years that I can't figure out how to get funded, right? So I really do think this is a cool opportunity to hear about other things, think about how your stuff fits in, and move it forward. Thank you, Patty.
Yes, this is great. And we do have a question about preparing for the NIA workshop if you have signed up. And I'll just say, thinking about that project, we heard some advice today. The clearer you can be about what it is you want to try to accomplish with your work and bring that to the meeting, then you'll be in a good place to have those conversations with the roundtables and maybe to get the most out of the time you spend in the workshop. So be thinking about that, and being able to bring something that you've actually written down, I think, is super helpful. But we'll be also just sending out more information for the registrants for the workshop as we get closer to the meeting. And with that, we're getting close to the end of our time, as much fun as we've been having today. And I would like to ask our panelists to share their final bottom line recommendation for all of you today. Their pearl of wisdom, so to speak. And Dana, we'll start with you.
Pearl of wisdom. Mine is that you should not be afraid to reach out to NIH program staff if you have an idea of some kind of research you want to be able to do. Just be mindful of the way that you're reaching out. If you give us something in writing, it's a lot easier to pursue a conversation than just something that's a blank slate. So I wish somebody had suggested that to me back when I had my failed attempts at grant applications when I was in academia. I ultimately was successful, but there was a lot of trial and error that may have been reduced somewhat if I had taken that step of reaching out and gotten some guidance or some feedback from program staff. So I think that's the pearl that I'll drop. Thank you.
Thanks. And Odette?
I'm not sure if I have a whole lot to add. I think just the smartest thing right now is just sign up for the RCCN newsletter. And feel free to email me if you have any questions. Also, there's a lot of, in addition to NIA funding, there's a lot of new money coming into the field, particularly if you're more in the basic science translational field. And I don't know how many of you are, but also check the AFAR website. We fund a lot of other initiatives. And then maybe even if you're not eligible, maybe one of your colleagues is, and you could potentially collaborate. There's some huge new funding sources coming to and foundations coming to the field, which will help really advance the field tremendously. So it's a good time to be in aging research.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And I'll just say for all our participants today, maybe as a next step in exploring this topic further, you can take a look at the website for the center program that may be best aligned with your research interest, just by the name or type of the center, and identify what their pilot opportunities are so that you can just begin this journey and check out what some of their upcoming deadlines are and make a plan or a goal for that. And definitely sign up for the RCCN mailing list or following on X to stay informed about your upcoming opportunities. And this is a precursor, as we said, to the conference workshop that will be happening at the GSA meeting. And if you haven't signed up, please try to get on the waiting list. And if all that fails, I think we also will be gathering materials together at that workshop that we can hopefully share more broadly. I want to thank our panelists today for generously sharing your time, experience, your perspectives. Thank you to our moderators and work group members who planned this grant chat. And thanks to all of our participants for your questions, comments, and of course, our big thank you to Judy Liu from GSA staff for all of her coordination that makes these grant chats possible. We are going to send out a brief survey following the event for your feedback and to help us plan future grant chats. So look for that. The slides, the recording, the materials from today will all be available on the GSA website in the section for the GSA grant chats. So thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.